And so this is why I love human design, because I think for many of us, and I really do believe this for Black liberation globally,
Yes.
in
Yeah.
my mind, the key to that, the pathway to that is spiritual path,
Mhm.
right?
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so happy that you're here, and I'm so excited today to be joined by Kemi Amin. Hi, Kemi. How are you?
I am good today. Today I am good. I am relaxed. Yes. How are
Yeah.
you?
I love that you're relaxed. I love that you're good. I'm doing good. I'm super excited to chat with you today to talk all things human design. You're in for a really exciting conversation for folks who are listening. And before we jump in, and before I give Kemi an opportunity to introduce herself, I would love to share how I discovered your work, Kemi. So, as many people know, because I talk about it all the time, I'm always referencing TikTok, but I was scrolling on TikTok and I happened to come across Kemi's page, Capricorn Moon, Capricorn with a K. And I was just really taken in by the images that were being used before I even realized it was human design. I was just like, ooh, these are really aesthetic images of Black and brown people, dark skinned people. Like, I was like, oh, this is an account I'm curious about. And then I looked a little bit closer and I saw that it was about human design, which is something, as folks who are listening know, I'm very interested in. I've talked about human design loosely on the show before, and I'm so excited that Kemi is here as an expert to talk to us more about it. And I just fell in love with your page. And there was one post in particular you had made where I just like left a comment because what you said in the post resonated with me, and you just responded back so thoroughly for free. And I was just like, no other like human design page I've ever interacted with has gone that in depth with me in a comment section on a social
Uh,
media platform. So immediately I was like, oh, okay, let me check out Kemi's offerings. And I got a full human design reading with Kemi and I loved it. I learned so much. It was super informative. And yeah, I immediately asked Kemi to come on the podcast. So here
yeah.
we are.
And I was happy to do it. Yeah, I was motivated. I'm very excited about human design. So I sometimes I can get carried away. I have to stop myself in the comment section.
Listen, you got a fan out of that. So thank you for that. And thank you for being here. So, with that, Kemi, I want to turn it over to you to tell folks a little bit more about who you are in the world today and how you'd like to be known.
Oh, that's such a great question. I wish I had thought about it a little longer, but yeah, who am I in the world today? Whew. Today I am a human being who is here, who is
Mhm,
taking it one step at a time. I am in a journey and an era of my life where I am becoming much more heart centered. And
yeah.
so, who I am in the world today is someone who is also still taking, my past and my experience with me as a strategist, a storyteller, a professional, but also someone who is being more grounded in her spirituality and my spirituality and just
Mhm.
feeling my feelings right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that answer. And I love that it's like so connected and rooted in who you are as a human being, not solely identified to all these like titles and labels that we hold.
Mhm.
I think that's really important too. So that was really beautiful. So one aspect of all of your incredible work, like we talked a little bit about the fact that you are working in real estate now, but also why you're here today is about human design.
Yeah.
And I would love to talk a little bit more later about the connection between human design and how you're working, where you're working, and how it
Yeah.
shows up in your professional life as
Yep.
well, because I think that will be super valuable to folks listening. But I want to
Mhm.
start at the very, very beginning
Yeah.
before we jump into that and talk about what drew you to human design. Like, how did you learn about it? What called you in about it?
Yeah. I would say, like, although, like I talked about earlier, like, I have been very kind of, especially the first part of my life, like, very focused on accomplishing and my professional life, especially as an adult in my professional journey. I've always been
Mhm,
a heart-centered person and a spiritual seeker. So that has always been a part of my life. Human design, though, I actually, what was that? That had to be, that's over over 10 years ago. I was in grad school, and a professor of mine who had a very strong impact in my life,
mm,
she had mentioned human design to me, and I didn't even know, because I when I was in grad school, I was getting my MBA in something called design strategy, which is very kind of
mhm,
like, yeah, like, there's a portion of it that's, like, called human-centered design, where you're focusing on the behaviors of human beings, so I'm thinking she's talking about that. I'm not even thinking
yeah,
there's any spiritual layers to this. So she tells me
mhm,
about it, and I don't know, she gave me a word salad essentially, bless her heart, but I searched it online, I Googled it, and started to read about it. I was like, "Ah, this is interesting." So it's like
mhm,
almost this kind of system of, like, designing your life, and that's kind of how I processed it at the time. And
mhm,
then when I started to look deeper into it and pull my chart, and I think I pulled my chart from, like, one of the old school websites like Genetic Matrix, shout out to them. I think they're definitely still around. And I was very taken aback because it was very confusing. It was a lot of information. I found out that I'm a generator, and I was, like, pissed
mhm.
off because I was like, "Well, hold on, there's a manifester type, and I'm not that? Like, I need to be manifesting." I don't wanna generate anything. So I was kinda like, "Oh my god, I don't wanna do this." And it was just, like, so much information too soon for me, and, I was mad about being a generator, not a manifestor, because I just didn't understand fully, and so I stepped away
Yeah,
from it for years. And then, it came back into my life again, probably, there was a few times throughout those years leading up to 2022 that it came up in my life, but I just wasn't really kinda dialed in with it. But then in 2022, I had recently left my job, and that was the first time that I didn't have, something that I was working on, a job, anything professional in many
mhm,
years. And
yeah,
so I
yeah,
I started to look into it and become curious about it and just doing research in it. I'm a 5-1, so there's, in human design, that one line is about investigating, so that's a huge part of my personality, and how I learn. And so when I started to dig into it, I was like, "Okay, let me start to uncover this some more, and I need support in this." So I started to look for how I can get certified in human design, and it was really important to me to see if I could learn it from someone who is, Black, or someone of color, a brown person. And so when I
mhm,
did some searching, I found Crystal Ferrero, who is of Filipino descent, and she grew up in the US, and she was living in Europe at the time, and she was offering this, certification course that was very thorough. It was an online certification process, and I loved it. And so from there, I became certified, and the more I was kind of reading myself in human design, I was learning more about who I am. It was really about that journey first, about understanding myself. But then in the practice of being certified, you start to read other people in your life. That's what I was doing. And that's how, like, it really started to blossom for me and start to make sense for me in my life.
yeah, what a beautiful story. I think it's so special. I have a story too, not about human design, but, like, a professor who deeply impacted me and
Mm.
showed me another way, and reminded me of my potential and, like, really set me on a trajectory
Yeah.
for my career. I think it's so special when we have those professors that, like, are near and dear to us in that way, and it's so cool that that professor put you on to human design, and the fact that you were doing an MBA program around design and strategy, like, that's so cool.
Yeah,
So, it's full circle in a lot of ways.
very
Yeah.
much so. Yeah, very kismic for sure.
Yeah. So let's take a little step back. So we talked about your origin story, but for folks who are just new to human design, who are hearing generator and 5-1 and one is the investigator, and you're like,
Yeah,
"What are you talking about?" Like,
yeah.
how would you just, like, describe human design in a simple, accessible way to someone who's new to
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, no, I totally get that because yeah, there are all these different elements to human design, and for people, just like a quick and raw kind of analogy. It's similar in ways and it actually integrates, but it's similar framework to astrology. So I would kind of describe it in that way for people, just like as a quick answer. But essentially, like human
Mhm,
design is a system around understanding your energy. And so it takes in all of these ancient wisdoms matched with modern science. So ancient wisdoms like
mhm,
the I Ching, which is the Chinese astrology system, the chakra system, and the
mhm,
Western and Eastern astrology. And it kind of like finds all of these overlaps in addition to modern science, which is physics and genetics as well. And so it kind of maps all of these together, finds their commonalities, and creates this system for how you're wired to make decisions, use your gifts best, and also interact with yourself and the world.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful framework. I think it also pulls from the Kabbalah
Yes.
too, I've
Yes.
heard.
Yes, it
Yeah,
does.
so and I like that analogy, and, when we get into talking about things like this, especially if you make any sort of connection to astrology, like, you have some folks who are like, "Oh, here we go with the woo woo," like, but what I will say is, like, from what I know of human design and
Mhm,
even guests I've had on the show in the past, like, I had a guest, her name was Fabi Cordero, and we actually went off on a tangent talking about human
mhm,
design for a few
mhm,
minutes in our
mhm,
but
mhm.
it's exactly what you said, Kemi, like, it's about harnessing your energy and, like, really learning how you show up in the world and how that interacts with other relationships with other people.
Mhm,
So, I
mhm,
think you gave us a little taste of why human design is so special, but,
mhm.
there are so many tools out there. I love that human design pulls from multiple tools, but
Yes.
you even have other systems like personality tests,
Yeah.
like numerology and, like, these other different things, and what is it specifically for you that makes
Mhm.
human design so transformative and so special as a self-discovery tool?
Yeah. Actually really love human design for this because one, again, I kind of me as as a person, I mix I'm a practical person and I'm a spiritual person, right? And so
Mhm,
I need to be
mhm,
able to I'm someone who is someone of belief and then also I need to see it kind of manifested in the world and like and
mhm,
work on it, right? And so for me and from my perspective, what makes human design stand out is um like how practical and personalized it is to each individual person. And so while like astrology is about like more about like who you are and maybe like
mhm.
energies that are at play at any given moment, human design kind of like shows us like who we are naturally and allows us to apply it to our everyday life. So I almost
Yeah.
see it like for folks who are like purely practical, it's just an experiment, right? So I try to kind of
Mhm,
tell people look at it as an experiment to work with. The beautiful thing about human design is that it doesn't require belief to practice it. And so
yeah.
you don't have to necessarily believe in astrology or follow the Kabbalah or anything like that to be able to practice and see how it might work in your life, right? Because there are very
Mhm,
practical steps that you can take once you understand your human design placements on like how to make decisions, what your strengths are, what your unmanaged strengths are, your shadow side, and how that
mhm,
can align with who you are and your right timing to kind of like just take one step at a time in your life. So I really love how
mhm,
practical it is. And for those who are spiritual or on their spiritual journey, I love human design because it's
mhm.
about energy. And so to me, the gateway to kind of a spiritual life and a spiritual walk is energetic. That's like the gateway drug essentially to like
Mhm,
living what some Buddhists say is your dharma, right? Moving and expanding spiritually is a great step one for someone on their spiritual journey.
mhm. Yeah. I love that response. I think that's really powerful. And I love how you described yourself as someone who wants the spiritual and needs it and craves it, but also desires the practical and like seeing things manifest in real life. And I think human design offers that duality, and the way that you've described it makes it really
Mhm.
grounded and tangible and real for people. It's not just all theoretical and, all these things, like, it's rooted in something real, so I think that's really powerful.
It's just really important for me, yes, for people to understand that because again, like I think that's where some of the heaviness of religion can like come from, right? It's just like to a certain extent exclusionary, right? And where with human design, I really love it because one, I mean, there's parts of it that are backed by science. Like when we're talking about genetics and physics, like we're talking about things that are called neutrinos, which are part of the human design, like how you're coded when you're like 3 months before you're born, and then once you're born. And then now science has confirmed that
Mhm.
neutrinos actually exist. And there is actually like matter a part of it. And like it's really like this encoding system that the universe has as we're coming into the world. So, yeah, I think it's just so important, though, to think about it from a very practical sense to begin with, which is just starting with yourself and your energy. And so this is why I love human design because I think for many of us, and I really do believe this for Black liberation globally,
Yes.
in
Yeah.
my mind, the key to that, the pathway to that is spiritual path,
Mhm.
right? And so to me, again, that
Mhm.
step one of starting with your energy, because when we look at
Yeah.
history, when we zoom out, it really is like this energetic play of like these collective bodies making these moves, asserting themselves, being victimized, all these different things. When you kind of zoom out in history, you kind of see how energy plays out, right? When you think of us as
Yeah.
different kind of collectives, as groups of people. And so again, I
Yeah.
do feel very strongly about human design as a first step for many of us, but really it could be a gateway potentially for you and your religious journey potentially. But again, like I do believe in like the spiritual walk and human design having this kind of like there's no amount of like there's no pressure around having to like perform a
Yeah.
certain way or be a certain way. You are only being who you are designed to be.
Mhm. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's really powerful too, and I you know, I'm not gonna go on a tangent, but as
Yeah.
someone who was raised a certain way, like
Mhm.
Christian, Seventh-day Adventist, like, went to Catholic school, like, all of those things, like, I am deep in my deconstruction era.
Yeah. Sure.
And I personally feel that, like, at the end of the day, we all as human beings have our own spark of divinity and creation. So, for anyone
Mm.
who is a believer of some kind,
Huh?
if we have a God who gave us the moon and the stars and everything else, then
Hello.
you best believe that we each might have a seed to imagine something different. So, if we as human beings can come up with a tool to help us better understand ourselves, walk
Mhm.
this life, understand each other, what is the harm in using the tool? Like,
Exactly.
you know?
Exactly.
So, I don't have time and patience for a lot of things. That's all I'm gonna
Yeah.
say on that. But I do love tools that help us to understand ourselves more deeply and each other and the world around us. And so
Yeah.
many religions at their core, when you strip many things down, have a lot to do with channeling and understanding energy,
Yes.
consciousness, spirit, soul,
Yeah.
like all of these things. I don't know the right word. We've just
Mm.
shrouded it in a lot of foolishness to cover up
Mhm.
the core, and it's important to get back to the core. So, I love that. So,
Yeah.
now I feel like we're at kinda at the point where it's time for you to really get in your bag
Yeah.
because, we in and of itself, this is a masterclass in a way, like an intro to human design for a
Mhm.
lot of people, but we don't have time to cover every single detail. But I
Sure.
would love for you to walk us through like some of the main components of human design when we talk about type, when we talk about
Mhm.
strategy, authority, profile, like those kinds of terms to better
Mhm.
acclimate someone who is new to human design or interested in it and dabbled a little but doesn't fully understand what these different things mean, to talk a little bit more about how these things kind of wire us to move through the world.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Human design on the very basic level, and your human design chart specifically, because
Mhm,
anyone who is introduced into human design, your introduction will be your chart, right? Because you might hear about it from someone else, and then you might be kind of directed to go pull your chart up, right?
mhm,
And so when you see your chart, what we call the body graph in human design, it is essentially your energetic blueprint. So it's a blueprint to your energy, right? So it shows you how you're built to operate, to connect, and to make pretty much aligned choices. So, like breaking that down even further, there's like a type, different energy types to describe your energetic role. So it's almost like an archetype, right? In human design, a lot of folks will say there are four different energy types. I like to say there's five because there's manifestors, generators, manifesting generators, projectors, and
meh,
reflectors. Yay. And so with a lot of times people will say manifesting generators are a subset of generators. I don't
mhm,
believe that. I think it's like, just to make a very kind of clear analogy, I think it's like having someone who is biracial, for example.
mhm,
Like you have a black parent, for example, and a white parent who comes together and they make a biracial child. They're a whole different, they
mhm,
kind of take both traits, characteristics from both parents and make their own thing and their
yeah,
own identity. And so I see manifesting generators as that. And so each has like a unique way of interacting with life and work. So
mhm,
for manifestors, they are here to kind of lead in a particular type of way. They tend to be ones who are vocal and can inform and speak, manifest through voice.
mhm,
Generators manifest through doing. Manifesting generators manifest through experimenting with life and finding the efficiencies of life.
mhm,
Projectors manifest through guidance, and reflectors manifest through being a mirror to the
mhm,
world. And so that's kind of like the energy types, and that's kind of like the top level.
yeah,
The next level is your strategy, which is how
mhm,
you're best set up to engage with the world. So it's like the way your energy naturally attracts opportunities and reduces resistance. So it's
mm,
kind of like how general strategy works, where you think about the way in which you're supposed to move or take action and how that looks in your particular body, in your
yeah,
unique body. So it is essentially your strategy, how you are
mhm,
meant to kind of move through the world and interact with people very specifically. So for example, as a generator, I am a generator. I am
mhm,
meant to respond. That's part of my strategy. So generators are very magnetic. I'm
mm,
always attracting opportunities and invites and all of these things into my world. I'm also for generators, what I tell them is you have to look at the signs and heighten your awareness. Be aware of everything because everything can be a sign for you. It's
mhm,
not just someone kind of emailing you and saying, "Hey, we're inviting you to a job interview." It's
mhm,
also like it could be a billboard, a soundbite you hear walking down the street, a
mhm,
magazine that you're looking at, an article that you read. Everything can be something for you to respond to as a generator. For example, and then another example is projectors. Your strategy as projectors are to be recognized and invited. And
mhm,
so you are not necessarily designed to just like initiate yourself and assert yourself when it comes to outside forces, other people and their energy. And so you wait to be recognized and invited. And once you're invited in, projectors are very strong leaders and guides for the rest of us. And so that's like your strategy, right? Like how you are best kind of set up to interact with the world. And then next is like your authority, which is your inner decision making system.
mhm,
So it shows you how your body, not your mind for most of
mhm,
us,
mhm,
how your
mhm,
body knows what's right for you. And so it's the way in which you make best set up to make decisions. Again, so for generators, it's sacral. So because we
Yeah.
have in the chakra system, our sacral center is defined, which just means we have consistent access to that sacral energy, which is literal life force energy. And
Yeah.
so with our sacral, the way we follow our authority is when we have to make especially big decisions, we just follow our gut. It's a gut
Mhm.
decision. It's like a full bodied yes or no. And that can look like an actual audible yes or no, or an
Mhm.
audible or uh-huh, or it
Mhm.
could feel energetic, like you feel it in your body somewhere when you want to say yes or affirm something, you want to like get up, you're full of excited energy.
Mhm.
If you're not feeling something, you could slouch. It could be anything for you, whatever gut decision means for you. That's kind of the generator way of kind of making a decision, knowing whether to kind of have that green light or that red light to step
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. I love that. And profile a little bit, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so profile's a little more nuanced, and a lot of what I would say is that your energy type, your strategy, and your authority, those are like the top three kind of starting points for
Mhm.
you in human design. And I would say I would kind of advise anyone to start there.
Yeah.
Once you kind of start to learn about those top three, the next three I would say to start to look into and dig into is your profile. And so your profile is pretty much this combination of two archetypes, and you often have you always have two numbers for your profile. So for me, I'm a 5-1. I can't remember what yours is,
I'm a
Aaliyah.
2-4.
Yeah, okay, yes, 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 I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you get two numbers and they look like fractions. They're
Mhm.
called a profile, and that is directly pulling from the I Ching, which is the Chinese astrological system, personality system. And so in profiles, there's a line 1 through 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Everyone has a combo of two numbers from one between 1 and 6. And so the way in which human design describes the profile is like a house. And
Mhm.
so line 1 is like the foundation of the house. And
Mhm.
then line 2 is like the first floor of the house, and so on and so forth. Line 3 is like in between the first floor and the second floor. And then you have
Mhm.
line 4, which is like the second floor. Line 5 is like the attic. And then line 6 is the roof. And
Mm.
so once you get past so from 1 to 3, lines 1 through 3, that's more of introspective lines, right? Where you're
Mm.
focused, self-focused, and focused on yourself and doing kind of your own thing to a certain extent. And then line 4 through 6 is more of like you're being seen. It's more of a
Mm.
leadership role that you're taking. And
Mhm.
so when you have those two combo numbers, they come together to describe or reveal your personality, your life theme, and how you are best designed to learn and relate to other people. So
Yeah.
that's your profile. And then the other two, final two, which is your centers, which is again, when you pull your body graph, your centers have all these shapes. So when you look at your body graph, it has like these squares pretty much and
Mhm.
triangles.
Yeah.
And so it's a combination of that when you pull your chart. And so those centers, again, are very much in alignment with the chakra system. The chakra system has 7 centers, while
Mhm.
in human design, there are 9 centers. And so those centers are essentially, they are either colored in, doesn't matter what color they are. I know sometimes it can be confusing when you pull your chart, there's all these different colors. As
Yeah.
long as you see that something's colored in, that's how you know it's defined, which means you have consistent access to that energy that
Mm.
is associated with that particular center. And
Mm.
then when it's open, undefined, also called undefined, but I like to just call it open, or white, that just means that your energy there isn't as consistent. However, you are able to maybe receive energy from other people and the outside world and amplify other people's energy and the energy of the environment. And
Mm.
so your centers are a big part of what make up your energy type as
Yeah.
well. And then finally, there's the gates and the channels, and that's all the little numbers in
Mhm.
each of the centers. When you pull your body graph, you'll see that. And each of those numbers, I like to call them gifts. So when they're defined or colored in, that means that you have a natural gift in that particular area. And then when it's open, again, you're receiving and amplifying other people's gifts. And then you finally have channels, which are essentially when one of the numbers in a particular center connects to another number and another complementary center, it creates kind of like it connects one gate to another gate and creates this amplified superpower or strength for you. And so when you look at your body graph chart, you'll be able to kind of like make sense of what I'm saying when you can see the shapes and the numbers and the lines, and that kind of helps to guide you through. But that's why I kind of take the profile, the centers and the gates is like the second step of human design. But that first step to really focus on, I would advise for anyone who's just getting into it, is to focus on your energy type, your strategy, and your authority.
Yeah, that's such a profound walkthrough. I as someone who is interested in human design and
Yeah.
who, like, is mildly, like, exploring my own,
Yeah.
I still feel so overwhelmed sometimes when I look
Yeah.
at the chart, and I was so glad to have a reading with you because you put into perspective and explain some things I really didn't understand. So I
Mm,
kind of felt strong already prior to our reading when it came to like
mhm,
type, strategy and authority and
mhm,
maybe a little profile. But when you
mhm.
start getting to the gates, the channels, the energy
Yeah.
centers, I was like, and as someone who is into chakras and like I do like the chakra system, I
Mhm.
still like, especially in human design, because there are a couple more than the typical seven we focus on here in the West.
Yeah.
The chakra system is much bigger than just seven. But
Mhm.
and something that I really liked what you framed for me is I have a lot of undefined, energy centers, and
Mhm.
I've always looked at that as like "Well, I'm just willy-nilly out here, like, what's wrong with me? Like, I don't nothing's defined," and I like
No.
the way you framed it in our reading and even just now in this
Mhm.
conversation for this podcast episode that it really is a gift to be able to receive and amplify other energies in other people or in your environment. For good or for bad, because I feel like I be amplifying energy good and sometimes it's not great. But it's been really helpful to learn and just the different gates, different channels, and like what a channel means and like what the
Yeah.
little filled in the channels, the filled in lines are in the chart.
Yeah.
Like it can be really overwhelming to look at, but when, like you
Mhm.
said, when you do take your time and study and learn more,
Yeah.
it's really informative. Since learning more about human design the last few years, I have been more mindful about,
Yeah.
like, how I'm feeling, how my energy is when it's really high, when it's really low, when I need rest
Mhm.
as a projector, when I need to, like, take a
Mhm.
moment to myself, and something that I keep coming back to from our reading is, like, like many people, I'm still trying to figure things out,
Yep.
and it can be so easy to be trying to worry about, like, what your purpose is now,
Mhm.
in the future, and I've done episodes about this in the past, but something that you kinda leveled for me during our reading was when you said, "Think about who I wanna be today, how I wanna show up today." Like, I don't always have to be in the future, which is I'm an Aquarius, it's very Aquarius nature to be in the future, but
Yeah.
to, like, bring it back down to the present, like, who do I wanna be today? How do I wanna show up today? Like, how do I
Yeah.
manage what's on my plate today?
Mhm.
And that was also something that's really valuable, so you pretty much answered my next question, which was for someone who is, like, just getting started, who looks at their chart and is like, "What the heck?
Yeah.
What does this mean?"
Yeah.
You recommend starting with type, strategy, and authority, and then when you get a grasp on that, moving on to profile and channels and gates and all of those things, so I think
Yeah.
that's really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I
Um,
would definitely like, yeah, just to kind of double click on that a little bit. Like, yeah, I
yeah,
definitely think that focusing on those three first. Sometimes I tell people to look at their profile as well, because sometimes that can be helpful, but it depends on how ready they are for all of that.
yeah,
But what I would say too, once you look up those three and maybe even do some research in the second three, kind of diving a little bit deeper, this is where a human design reader or analyst can come in handy for you, right? Because
yeah,
they can like have a conversation with you specifically about your own chart and your own energetic makeup and connect the dots for you. In a way that, kind of piecemealing research can be very helpful in starting to understand it. But again, they are able to kind of connect the dots and maybe kind of do some of that work that you don't, because they have the expertise in it so you don't have to do it, especially if you're not someone who's like wanting to research all the different levels of it.
Yes, absolutely, and
Yeah.
thank you for that advice, and I second that. That's why I got a reading with Kemi. Okay, so, um, I want to talk a little bit more about living in alignment with your design.
Hmm.
So, maybe you can talk a little bit about your experience in terms of living in alignment with your design as a generator, and
Yeah.
also in general for some of the different types, like, what does that kind of look like?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and so when I really decided, okay, I'm gonna dive into this generator stuff and found out that I am meant to respond, that was life-changing for me. First of all, I'll say the founder of human design, his name is Ra Uru Hu. When
Mhm.
I heard that name, I thought a black man. No.
Ooh, we wish.
Yeah. I was like, because I'm from the Bay Area, so when I hear "Ra," I'm like, "Oh, okay. He's a black man. Peace, brother," but no.
No. No.
Um, he was RIP, passed away, but a
Mhm.
very white man who,
Mhm.
and I have my theories about this. Like, I think that it is very great and and a power in of itself to be able to look at all these ancient wisdoms and combine them to make this system, right?
Mhm, mhm.
But I think the claims that he has made is that he's gotten these downloads, and the downloads might be the actual I Ching book,
Yeah.
the actual book on astrology. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
actual Kabbalah, scripture and like pulling
Mm.
it together.
The
And so
colonization of indigenous tools.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And so, as if it was like a download from somewhere in the ethers,
Mhm,
who knows? But but I do appreciate the combination of all of these ancient wisdoms to kind of
mhm.
make something that we can use and that's very practical. So yes, for me, being a generator, and I'm a sacral generator, right? So my authority is sacral. So I'm gonna follow that yes or no gut decision,
Yeah.
and then for me is to respond. And so when I found out about that, it started to make sense because
Mhm.
there are ways, like I'm also like a double Scorpio. So like
Mm.
I don't want to be seen, and I
Yeah.
have a 12th house stellium as well. So in
Same.
a lot of ways I know I don't want to be seen,
Yeah.
and but then I just have this kind of natural, like people look to me, that's just been my experience for
Mhm.
leadership or answers or to
Yeah.
help solve problems. And then there's part of me that desires to do that, and so I
Mhm.
would insert myself in situations and it just would not work out in some ways, and I
Yeah.
just felt like I was swimming upstream. I just kept hitting a wall and I was like, what is up, like, and for a long time I was internalizing it as something was wrong with me,
Mhm.
not knowing that I was just living what we call in human design our not self, which is
Yeah.
not living in our design, right?
Mhm.
And so when I found out that I am a sacral generator, it was like, okay, this makes sense. So now, kind of looking for the signs, and then the one thing I tell people when I do readings is pattern recognition is so important. So
Mhm.
going back into your history and looking at times where you've made decisions, what did it feel like? What was the result, the consequences of it? How did it
Mhm.
benefit you? Did it work out? Did it not? Did you say yes?
Mhm.
Did you say no? And really kind of starting to document that and then start to continue to do pattern recognition in your future,
Yeah.
because it will just help you to understand how you're meant to make decisions and move through life based on your authority and your strategy. And
Yeah.
so another example is you as a projector, right? And
Yeah.
your authority, if you can remind me.
Yes, splenic.
Splenic, yes. Which I actually love for you as a projector. But like,
Mhm.
so for example, with a splenic projector as yourself, the spleen is your authority, and so the splenic center, which when you look at your human design chart, you will see on that body graph, the spleen, depending on where you're looking at it, is going to be on your left side
Mhm.
of the body graph chart. and
Mhm.
the lower part of the body, and that is one of the oldest centers. And so it is
Mhm.
a center of awareness, of survival, of fear, and intuition. And so when you're kind of making your decisions, you're going to use your intuition. And a lot
Mhm.
of folks might say that intuition, in the moment, it happens in the moment, which it does. But some
Mhm.
people are of the belief that it only happens once and that's it. You lose it. And once it reminds you of something in that moment, it's gone forever. But I think if it's meant for
Yeah.
you, it's going to come back to you, right? And so, as
Yeah.
a splenic projector, you are meant to make decisions by using your natural intuition. And that could be like a little tingle on your side, that could be just an inner knowing. It
Mhm.
just really all depends on the human being and like how your body speaks to you. And in
Mhm.
some cases, your mind speaks to you about what to do.
Yeah.
And so being a projector, your strategy of being recognized and invited. And so again, as a projector, I like to describe projectors as an arrow. And
Mhm.
so like being an arrow, arrows guide, right? And so they point you in the right direction. You also kind of are like a bird in some ways because you can kind of see a bigger
Not a
picture.
bird. Oh, okay. I like that. That's okay. Maybe that's why I really love birds. I don't know. I am
You're
one,
not a
clearly.
bird.
Okay, keep going.
I don't mean a bird like a bird,
I
but
know.
like a bird.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, like, being able to see the bigger picture, being able to connect the dots, which allows
Yeah.
you to guide, right?
Mhm.
But then also, an arrow, it points, it can poke.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
sometimes, especially if it's not invited, if it's not kind of brought into the space and it's just
Mhm.
poking and inserting itself, it can kind of come off as intrusive to some folks or rub folks the
Yeah.
wrong way. And I think
Mhm.
that a lot of projectors that I've worked with, that's been their journey of like, wanting to participate like we
Mhm.
all want to do as human beings is be a part of something, but maybe not understanding their design and it coming off as kind of, again, inserting yourself or just
Yeah.
kind of pushing against something. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that is something that a lot of projectors go through. And I think once you start to understand your design, you understand that, okay, it is my job to kind of build a relationship with patients and wait to
Mhm.
be recognized
Yeah.
and invited. And the other piece of that is you're not just sitting around watching paint dry, right? So
Mhm.
you're like all of us are designed to do as human beings, very passionate about this, is to build a relationship with creative expression. To put
Mhm.
yourself out there. So you're not
Yeah.
just, and putting yourself out there doesn't mean you're inserting yourself. You're just being a human being, which is expressing yourself creatively. So, for
Yeah.
example, if you're someone who is a social person. You see, you're a 2-4, so you kind of have a mix of being social and being
Yeah.
more introverted.
Yeah. It's a struggle. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, to when you are feeling it, to like be out in the world, you just go to an event, go to a
Mhm.
conference, go to a party,
Yeah.
and you're putting yourself out there in that way, or
Mhm.
doing creating some art, whatever your art form is, and posting it on social
Yeah.
media, and then someone
Yeah.
can recognize you in that way and
Mhm.
invite you in. And so that is kind of some of how that strategy works. So, like with the projector, the recognize and be invited. With the generator, it's that sacral yes or no, full body yes or
Mhm.
no. For manifestors, it's literally just to inform, because again,
Mhm.
they have that voice. Their throat center is defined. All
Mhm.
manifestors and manifesting generators defined throat. So for manifestors, pure manifestors, you're just informing, and your words become flesh, right? So
Yeah.
you manifest that reality for yourself. And then manifesting generators, it's that mix of like the sacral yes or no, and then
Mhm.
inform, because you're the combination. And then with reflectors, there's the journey of kind of the lunar cycle, because reflectors are
Mm.
based their energy, their strategy is based on the moon. So
Yeah.
that's even doubling down on building the relationship with patients. So all of
Yeah.
us have these different journeys, and I think the beauty in that and the liberation in that is that we aren't all designed the same, and we aren't all meant to be the same and operate the same, which this
Mhm.
society we're living in will trick you into
Yeah.
believing that that's what we're supposed to be, but it is
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. I think we talked about that during my reading too, that we operate in a society that leans heavily on like generator energy
Mhm.
or like
Mhm.
manifesting generator energy
Yeah.
and like or other subsets of types that are smaller percentages of the population, like
Mhm.
reflectors, like projectors, like even manifesting generators, like
Yeah.
this is a different way of being
Yeah.
than the way our society has been for the last 100, 200 years,
Mhm.
300, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
I love that reminder about reflectors really being in sync with the moon because if you think about the evolution of society, there was a time when we were more in sync with the moon
Yeah.
and the stars and like how we did things and when we did things, like
Yeah.
when we grew crops, when we had certain rituals, and like we've just like divulged from that completely.
Yeah.
So I love that we also have these reflectors to remind us to like get back to human nature. Um
Yeah.
and hopefully like show more of the rest of us a new way. So I think that's super cool. Okay, so we've talked about like what living and like working in alignment looks like, but I also love human design as a tool for how we can connect and relate to others.
Mhm.
So for me, like a very basic level, having a very basic understanding, I love when I have another friend who's interested in it because we can at the very least be like, "Oh, I'm this type, you're this type. Like,
Yeah.
I'm this profile, you're this profile." And like in a way, it helps us to better understand like how the other shows up.
Mhm.
But when you're thinking about like all kinds of relationships, like navigating them romantic, family, even creative collaborations. Like this
Yeah.
is a creative collaboration, like on this podcast talking about human design. How can better understanding our design help us like in our relationships with other people?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. And I love it so much. And it's interesting because it's so helpful to understand your design and learn it for how you move through the world. But then the other piece of that, like you were saying, is like not everyone knows they're human design. And you're not the first person you
Exactly.
meet, even though I remember I was on a plane and the person I was sitting next to, the entire plane ride, like I just gave her an introduction of human design and broke it down, but she was ready
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I
Yeah.
might have scared the person away. But we don't always have that opportunity to
Mhm.
to know other folks and their human design placements and everything.
Mhm.
But I think that understanding your design, and if you are building that relationship and that person is open to it, understanding the design of others can like honestly like completely change the way you experience relationships because it helps you see that like people truly operate differently and
Yeah.
uniquely to them, right?
Yeah.
Some people need space, some people need consistency, some people need to process their emotions slowly, some other people move quickly. So like when you
Mhm.
understand those differences are energetic, right? And not personal, that can like bring about so much like structure and like
Mhm.
flow instead of like clashing with people, right? So you avoid a lot of the clashing when you can be kind of open-minded enough to understand that people operate differently and
Mhm.
if you can kind of like work with the way they operate doesn't mean that you won't ever have any clashes, right? But
Mhm.
then there's a perspective there, just like any other ancient wisdom like astrology, like it can bring about this like level of understanding that can heighten your emotional intelligence and how you kind of interact with others. And so
Yeah.
human design essentially gives us like this language to what we often feel, right? But we can't name it. And so
Mhm.
it helps us connect like with less friction, maybe not
Mhm.
completely no friction, but less friction and more appreciation. But then, even when there is friction, it can allow us to kind of navigate through that friction in a
Yeah.
much more harmonious way
Yeah.
and or to just be able to have more resistance even if it's not
Mhm.
harmonious. It's interesting because I do some like facilitation as well and like I'm really kind of leaning folks into the idea of conflict resilience as opposed to like resolution or management because sometimes you don't always have that, you can't always manage it or you don't
Mhm.
always have the resolution around it. But so with that said, I think understanding yourself, right, helps you kind of navigate through the world and then being able to better understand other folks through human design. It can just also allow you to understand who do I kind of gel with romantically better? Like
Mhm.
who can I collaborate with? Who are like power partners with me? The beautiful thing too in human design is that if you have a center or a gate in a particular center that is defined, but it's not necessarily connected to the complementary gate in the complementary center, which makes a channel,
Yeah.
someone else can show up and you form a channel together because maybe
Yeah.
they have that complementary gate and that complementary center defined. And so
Yeah.
you're able to, even if you don't know it, right? You can even look at some of the relationships you have now and see, oh, I actually really work well with this person, or we really get
Mhm.
along, or I'm married to this person that I really love. And, we've been
Mhm.
together for this amount of time, or we just met and I feel like it's love at first sight.
Yeah,
Um,
or they bring out a certain kinda energy in you that you don't always, like, feel otherwise. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. We come together and it's like I'm amplifying their energy and I'm like
Yeah.
we're feeding off of each other.
Yeah.
There is more likely than not that you all have some sort of complement. You probably even can create a channel together. And so
Mhm.
understanding that can be very helpful. And they also there's also like a practice of human design, synastry in human design, and like how
Yeah.
relationships can come together best.
Yeah, that's so cool. Thank you for talking through that a little bit more, and it's so
Yeah.
true, like, obviously, you're not always gonna know
Yeah.
immediately, but maybe
Yeah.
if it's depending on the relationship, if you ever get to a point where it's something you're curious about exploring
Mhm.
together, that's something you can explore. Because I am personally notorious, or if I'm, like, talking to somebody, getting that birth time child, like, I am one of those.
Yeah.
I'm gonna check everything. It's okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but like I said, I also like to talk about it with friends who are also curious and interested, and it's not just human design. I've had a friend put me on to Enneagram because that's something she was interested
Mhm.
in, and I was like, "Oh, let me look up my type there," and, like, it's all kinds of stuff. I just think it's nice to better be able to, like, understand and relate to people. Obviously, you
Mhm.
learn
Mhm.
from people as you interact with them, you see, but sometimes these tools can help you to put some more into perspective and to
Yeah.
understand more deeply. And I think if it's the type of relationship where you want to go deeper and you want to understand someone more deeply and how
Yeah.
you function together, there's no harm in using a tool that can help you to understand a little bit more.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And I mean, I'm hoping that human design becomes more mainstream in
yeah.
similar ways to the way in which astrology has to a certain extent. I think I've heard of and seen like more leading edge organizations and companies integrate
Mhm.
human design in their professional development and just team development. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that's cool too, and
Mhm.
that's so true, especially when it comes to, like, team design. Because 'cause I've seen other tools be used in those kinds of settings for teams to, like, better understand each other, and I'm like, "Actually, you guys might need to check something else out." But
Right.
yeah, that's so true. Okay, so I feel like some of the questions I have left for you, we've actually touched on a little bit already. Like we
Mhm.
talked a little bit about alignment, but this podcast in particular really does talk through creativity a lot,
Mhm.
entrepreneurial spirits a lot. Like it really is for people who have this burning desire to create something, whether
Mhm.
it's art, whether it's a business, to share their voice, whatever the case it may be. So I'm just kind of curious, if there's anything you want to expand on that you might have said already in terms of how someone listening who is a creative or who's learning their creative path would
Mhm.
like to leverage human design to support them on their creative journey. Are there any tips or words of wisdom you'd like to share?
Yeah, yeah. I would say one thing I would if you're especially if you're really focused on purpose, one is to kind of like understand what your center that is called the G and self center, if it's defined or open, what does that mean for you? When it's defined, there is a constant kind of sense of self that's there, a sense of identity that's there. When it's open, again, similar to what I told you, Aaliyah, it's like
Mhm.
asking yourself on a daily basis, what is my purpose today? Right?
Yeah.
And so not being more a little more flexible around who you are and how you show up. And that's
Mhm.
okay, right? And so that's one piece, right? The other piece with human design is another aspect, that's another layer, right? That's called the incarnation cross. And
Mm.
that's like pretty much your soul's contract, why you are here from a human design perspective and kind of what you are here to not necessarily do, but who you are here to be and what
Mhm.
role you are here to play. And you can apply that to your creative practice, your creative work, your professional work, if that's separate, and your relationships. In the incarnation cross, there's a lot of different kind of archetypes within the incarnation cross, and I would just kind of advise people to look into that once you're ready. And it really is kind of a zooming out of your body chart and looking at what are your strongest gifts. What are the
Mhm.
channels that show up for you that are the strongest? That is really your body's way of saying, I am here to really do this and focus on this. And that can be filtered into whatever work that you feel called to do.
Yeah, I love that, and this is also selfishly a personal reminder to me to, like, do more research around my
Yeah.
incarnation. You definitely talked about it, and I'm still
Mhm.
just like, oh, I'm just gonna focus on the other areas and leave that one alone."
I totally hear you. It's definitely a deeper layer, so you don't
Yeah,
necessarily have to knock it out right off the
yeah,
bat for
yeah.
sure. The names can be
Little
very
yeah,
intimidating, so don't be intimidated by the names. Just focus on like what it means, the meaning behind it.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think that goes back to what we talked about before in terms of like for someone who might be curious but might be intimidated by all the terminology and like all the different
Mhm.
things, like to just pace yourself and take your time, start with those first three, your type, your strategy, your authority, and
Yep.
then go into the next phase and learn a little bit more in stages. So
Exactly.
I feel like, Kemi, this has been so informative and incredible and fun. And I don't well, I was already sold, but I feel like somebody else listening is sold. But for
Yeah.
anyone who might still be a skeptic or unsure about human design, who, like we said before, might think it's a little like woo woo, who might
Yeah.
be on their own journey when it comes to beliefs, practices, tools, all those things. Is there anything you would like to leave a skeptic with in terms of this that they can, think about?
Yeah, yeah. No, I listen, I get it. I think in the last several, I don't know, 100, 200 years maybe, we've been very focused on science, and that's very
Mhm.
valid. I'm someone who believes that science is also another road to God. I believe all roads lead to God, to be honest with
Yeah,
you. And so
yeah.
but I totally understand the skepticism, especially with all of the different things. And, honestly, the way that Western culture specifically can take, like you said, colonize and capitalize on spirituality. You
Mhm.
start to build a level of cynicism around it. And
Mhm.
so I totally get that. But the thing that I kind of will double down on is one, yes, human design is made up of these ancient systems and wisdoms and modern science, like I talked about. And folks can kind of do the research on their own with that because it's definitely
Yeah.
out there. But what I usually say is you don't have to believe in it for it to work. Right.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
think of it again as an experiment. It's not
Mhm.
and not a belief system if that's not your journey,
Yeah.
and so trying your strategy, your authority for a few weeks and just simply like noticing what happens.
Yeah.
And most people find that life gets smoother,
Mhm.
decisions feel clearer,
Mhm.
and your energy might feel more grounded. And kind of that experience will speak louder than any theory, that I can talk about or speaking about any kind of divinity about anything. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's just about being practical first and foremost and
Yeah.
understanding yourself and how your energy works. Because at its core, it's about awareness, not necessarily
Mhm.
like an ideology or
Right.
anything. So
Yeah.
I would just encourage a skeptic to, if you're curious, just experiment for a week. Find out, go look up your chart, your human design chart. Start with your energy type, your strategy, and your authority. And you can even start with small decisions and see how that feels for you and document it. And you can just take it a week at a time if you'd like, or a day at a time if you like, and see how it works and maybe how it doesn't work. But yeah, I would just invite anyone, whether they are a skeptic or not, to just experiment.
Yeah. I love that, and I think experimenting is a great way for someone who's like curious and wanting to get started to take that first, step to begin. But even before that, I know you had mentioned a site that you used previously when you first started, but where do people start for real? Like what site are you using to check a chart? Where can they find you on your TikTok to make sure that they're looking at your work to even explore it a little bit more, like those sorts of things too?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I like to use genetic matrix because they, when I'm kind of diving into a reading,
Mhm,
I've used that before. But
mhm,
honestly, like I'll use a, a site called myhumandesign.com. It's very
mhm,
simple, it's straightforward, and it adds a few more elements to the human design, your human design chart, like what we call veritables, like your strongest sense, as in
mhm,
like the different senses, touch,
yeah,
smell, hearing. Like there's these different senses that you might have, or this sense that you have that is your strongest, and like so it kind of integrates that, and I like to integrate that into my readings as well. But it's
mhm,
very simple, and I really like it because sometimes the chart can be very kind of convoluted. And so this is a very kind of simple illustration of your body graph as
mm,
well. And so it's kind of very simple and sleek and clean. So you can kind of get a better understanding. So I'll use that website, myhumandesign.com, to pull charts. And on my TikTok, I recommend that to my clients. I recommend that to everyone, to go
yeah.
and use that first because it just gives you straightforward information.
Yeah, I've used myhumandesign.com too, and I think I've I think I've shared it too. But yeah, like even your TikTok, I mentioned at the beginning, following your Capricorn Moon page on
Yeah.
TikTok also has helped me to learn more. Like you share a lot of great posts that have a lot of information, like
Mhm.
and the way you respond to folks as well. Like I think it's really just valuable to
Oh,
learn a little bit more too. So
yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, people, yeah, can find me on TikTok, Capricorn Moon. That's the only place on social media that I am on for now because
yeah, for now.
I have an Instagram and waiting, but oh, I have such a, I don't even want to say love, tolerate, hate relationship with it.
Yeah.
But yes, I do break down. I try to break it down in simple language for
Mhm.
folks. All of the, like right
Yes.
now, we're in a series where we're going through all the gates. And
Mhm.
series is going to be all the channels and then just different things that come up with human design I like to post about to answer folks'
Yeah.
questions. And it centers Black folks. So the visuals is around Black people. And as much as possible, I like to use music that is created by Black people or at least
Yeah.
influenced by Black culture. So yeah, my TikTok account. And then also you can get a reading with me to find out more. And then I just started a Substack where people, it's pretty much
Yeah.
an advice column for
Yes.
human design. So people can submit questions and I'll do my best to answer them through a post.
Yeah. I love that. We will make sure to link all of that in the show notes so that it's easy for folks listening to find your work, to book a reading with you, to follow your Substack, to learn more about what you're doing. So I'll make sure that all of that is linked. And yeah, before we close out, I would just love to ask you, like, take the human design cap off for a second and just
Yeah.
like you personally, what is something that's bringing you joy these days or something that's helping you to stay grounded while you're doing all of the incredible work that you do.
Yeah, yeah. What's bringing me joy? Well, this morning I actually with my sister, we had a tea ceremony, which she
Ooh.
introduced that to me and I actually love it. Like her and her
Oh, no.
friends. Yeah, I know. Her and her friend did it while she was on a work retreat and
Mhm,
she kind of came to me with it and literally you make the tea, you sit down and you take at minimum 3 cups of like little cups of tea and you drink it in
mhm.
silence. And so
Mm.
I really like there's no talking or anything. It's so funny because when I was in my 20s, which was, 20 years ago, I was more than 20 years
Hey,
ago, I was
you can't tell.
appreciate that. But when I was in my 20s, I used to do like a talk fasts. So I would just
Mm,
like be quiet for
yeah.
24 hours and I did that a lot. Again, I was always this spiritual person kind of being called
Mhm,
to my spiritual journey, and then I would do that. And then one day I just stopped doing it. I just got overwhelmed with life. And then this was just
mhm,
a really great reminder for me to kind of get back into being kind of being to myself and like, quieting my mind essentially.
mhm,
And being
mhm.
present. That's a huge one for me. So that is
Mhm.
bringing me a lot of joy right now.
I love that. I love that it's like the tea ceremony that you did is helping to connect you back with your younger self.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of a tea ceremony, like basically being quiet together. Like, yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
I like that. That's
Yeah.
lovely. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um,
Sure.
Kemi, this has been so incredible.
Oh,
I have learned so much again, and I know folks listening have learned something new too. Thank you so much for showing up so beautifully, so wonderfully, so masterfully to talk more about human design and share more about your expertise. And yeah, this was a great conversation. Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much, Aaliyah. I love the work that you're doing, and you
No.
just have such amazing energy. So I'm so
Well, thank
thrilled
you.
to be here and talking about human design, which is something that I really love, and I really love it
Yeah.
for Black folks in particular too.
That part, that
Yeah.
part. I'm so happy to see you leading the charge in this space and, like, taking up space because, as I said, we need to see us reflected, and I love that I was able to find your work and connect with you, so thank you again.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Thank you.